Welcome to LCS Talks. I'm Berkley Glazer, and I'm the principal of the middle school here at Langley Christian. And today on the panel, I've got Kevin Merchandani, who is our Director of Instruction for K-12. I've got Joel Ditson, who is our high school principal. And I've got Eric Bylenga, who is our Director of Information Technology for K-12. All right, gentlemen, let's talk about faith, technology, and identity.
All right, Eric and Joel, thanks for joining us here. We'd love to hear a little bit about your story, your perspectives, your journey with technology. Can you tell us a little bit about which aspects of your own lives are more inviting of technology and which parts you're more skeptical about?
Yeah, I mean, I go first. I'm the IT director here. So, I mean, yeah, the technology is a huge part of my life. I really love networking. I like diving deep into that. I have a collection of vintage computers at home that I really enjoy restoring and repairing. Technology is a huge part of my life. On the flip side, there's a couple of pieces of technology that I've chosen to avoid. I used to be a big Facebook user, early adopter, that sort of thing, but I didn't like all the aspects, what it was doing to me in terms of my relationships with others, my envious nature when I see all the fancy vacations all my friends seem to be going on and that sort of thing. And I just found it led to a lot of dissatisfaction in my life. So that's one area of technology, I guess you could say, that I've chosen to avoid just out of principle, because I think it's just been healthier for me. I also have a terrible phobia of things like Alexa. I get creeped out by a microphone always listening to me, which it is doing. So I don't trust that. But by and large, I mean, there's so many good uses for technology. It's a huge part of my life, obviously.
Great. Joel, over to you.
Yeah, I think it can be a tricky question, because there are parts of technology that are incredible and align, I would say, with, I kind of think of it from a value perspective, align with my values. So, it's easy to appreciate my dishwasher at home because it saves me time and it allows me to do more things that I value, like, say, spending time with my family. So something like that. Whereas it can be trickier, I think, when we encounter technologies, and Eric alluded to this with the Facebook references, that in some ways may misalign with our values, and then from there, it's pulling me away. So I think that's a question that we constantly have to ask ourselves, and I ask myself all the time, is this aligned with my values? Is it helping me do the things that I want to do and to do better? Is it helping me spend more time with my family, to be more efficient in my job? Or is it drawing me away from those things and distracting me and creating, maybe increased stress, increased anxiety, feelings of jealousy, those types of things. So, and there's some technologies that are probably more prone to do that. But I think that's kind of the lens I try and approach it from, for which ones I try to shift away from and which ones I bring more closely.
Yeah. I want to go back to something that Eric said a few episodes ago. And it went something like, relationship comes before safety systems. So
yeah,
even though we are going to be talking about safety and Eric uses language of defense and how to set up healthy parameters, what I want us to do first here is to go back to our LCS technology guiding principles. And in particular, I'm really interested in hearing from Joel and Eric about accountability versus surveillance. Can you give us a little bit of a vision of what that looks like as a Christian learning community?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it comes back to a foundational understanding of who we are and who we are in Christ, right? We understand that as human beings, we are fallen. We live in a sinful world, and so everything that we create, and God has created us to be creators, has been tainted by sin. So, for example, I mean, we can use technology to create electronic prosthetics to help people move and have greater mobility, but we can also create guided nuclear warheads to kill people. So with that understanding and understanding who we are, when it comes to online technology, I think, especially when we're raising our children, we need to engage first in the heart relationship. I mean, we can have all the technological safeguards in place that money can afford, but at the end of the day, we really need to break it down to, okay, well, what are we filling our kids' minds with? What are we filling our kids' hearts with? And so to create parameters, I think first and foremost, we need to set good practices ourselves, how we're demonstrating how to use technology to our kids by what we do. So if we're on our phones all day, that's a problem. If we are using our internet in private places, that's maybe not the best thing to be demonstrating to your children. It's also good, I think, to engage in those open conversations with your kids about where you yourself are, struggling with that. Like, oh, I spent too much time on YouTube. I shouldn't have done that today. I shouldn't have been doing this or that. Or, oh, this is really cool. Come see this. Because we need to present both sides too. Technology isn't just an evil thing too. There's great good that can come out of it too if we're using it to enhance our knowledge or our love of God's creation or love of God Himself.
Yeah, I completely agree, Eric, in that the heart is the core of what we're teaching when it comes to knowledge around technology, how we interact with it, how we use it, and how if we're not careful, it can use us. And that that old saying that if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. I think that's a piece that we want to be mindful of as well as we interact with some of these technologies, and those are the pieces that adults, children, whomever can be. We're all susceptible to being kind of drawn into the constant checking, the notifications popping up, the drawing us out of the places we want to be and into the places where, again, we're a bit more in that product environment. Kevin mentioned surveillance and accountability, and from a secondary school perspective, I'll have to say I find it somewhat interesting at times that sometimes we take a little bit of a hands-off approach to technology and how we view it. And we don't adopt necessarily the similar or the same approach in other areas that can also potentially be risky for students, for our children as they're growing up. So, I mean, we would never put a student behind the wheel of a car and let them go and just say, hey, I'll check in on you in a few months. How's that car working 6 months later? We're very aware that it could be a dangerous thing, that we need to teach them how to use it properly before they get on the road, that they're going to interact with other vehicles and other cars and other drivers. How do you do that safely? We train them. We ride with them for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then they move forward with it, and eventually we let them go. And every parent who has a driver with an N right now is remembering that day that they drove off in the car their first time on their own. And, you're probably a little bit nervous at that time. I think phones and the screens and the access that we have to kind of the knowledge in the different parts of the world right now, I don't think I'm overstating if I say can be as dangerous as driving a car when you're not trained. And we maybe take a bit too much of a hands-off approach sometimes.
Yeah, I was going to add to that too. I think us as parents now too, we remember a time before we had telephones, or not telephones, smartphones specifically, and social media and that sort of thing. Whereas our kids now, they do not have this collective memory of not having this. This has always been the way it is. That their parents have always had social media, have always had smartphones. I think one key thing to take away from this too is that we need to equip our kids to know how to live in a world where they can use their imaginations, where they don't have to be fixed and fixated on having a device all the time. So even if they make bad decisions down the road with their technology usage, they still know how to get back to a time before, or they remember a time before they had access to it, and they have built-in mechanisms to help them get back there.
It's a really great image that you're leaving us with. We've been talking about John 10 and this idea of being filled and having life abundant. And even before Jesus says that in the Gospel of John, he gives this image of the shepherd and the gate and the security that comes from being with one who has authority. And what I love about what you were sharing earlier, Joel, was that we can set up healthy parameters that allow for a sense of freedom. And we really want students to have freedom to explore, to be creative, to technology come alive in their lives in a really positive way. And without having a sense of freedom, technology just makes us a slave to itself. And so putting it in its rightful place is a really important job of educational practice and the things that we're doing as a school community. So I'm wondering if we can kind of build on this a little bit here and look at our guiding principle of discernment versus mindless acceptance. And what does that look like in terms of our school community as we encourage good digital citizenship?
Yeah, we can definitely put that into maybe some scenarios that we can get Joel and Eric to reflect on. First scenario here is for Eric. How would you go about setting up a healthy environment at home for students?
Yeah, again, I think it comes down to a good primary and a good secondary defense. When I say a primary defense, I mean the relationship aspect of things. I mean, the first and best defense you can have is not a technological defense in your home. So I like to do simple things like this. Like in our household, we've set time limits and device limits. So when our kids have bedtime, their devices do not go into their bedrooms with them. They go into our bedroom and they get turned off. Time limits also extend to how much access they have during the day. So if they're doing homework, okay, that's one thing, and they need to be on Google Classroom, fine. But if they're doing something else, I mean, if we're talking broadly, I mean, that even comes down to how much screen time they're getting when it comes to movies and television too, right? So setting that as a parameter. I always get my kids to use, if they are using the internet, it's got to be in a public place. Then there's no, I mean, even if they get on an accidental rabbit trail someplace, they're going to be quickly brought back to account because there's someone always watching. And then we can have a conversation about, okay, what did you see? What is this? Is this good, bad? Provide context for that sort of thing. Another big thing too, and I think we forget this, is that kids have their friends over. We assume they don't have anything, but probably they do. I had one instance where my kids were in the backyard and the neighbors brought over an iPod and were showing them things on there. Whether that's good or bad is irrelevant, but I didn't know till after the fact, and I should have been aware. And knowing and understanding what technologies your kids want to use, and be the gatekeeper. So if they're excited about a new piece of social media, go and read the privacy policies, go check out what content is actually on that, know who they're communicating with, know what the pitfalls are. I mean, even gaming consoles too are so interconnected that even an innocent game can have a very damaging online content. So I think that's very important to be watching out for too. So that's your primary. And then secondary defense, it will be your technology, but that's a backup. That's a failover. That's not something that you rely on to be your number one go-to. That's a helper.
Mm-hmm. All right, Joel, give us your top tech tips that you can give us for parents and students.
Sure. Yeah. I think even to, as I jump in there, just to build on as well on something Eric was saying, and I'm tying it back, I guess, to my driving scenario from earlier, but I think you mentioned a bit of familiarizing yourself with the technology, and it's quite easy for most from a driving perspective because, a parent, maybe I've been driving for 25 years. I'm very familiar. The car and the rules haven't changed a lot. My child might need to connect my phone to the Bluetooth in my car for me, but as far as driving it, I'm the expert on that, and the scenario's flipped, where in many cases the student and the child is the expert on the technology. So I would really encourage step out of the comfort zone. Don't shirk things off as just a fad or just a kid's thing. If your child is spending a ton of time on Snapchat or TikTok, go and sign up for it and dive in and learn how to use it and what's out there and become familiar with it so that you can have that conversation with them and it's not a foreign piece to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would add to that and say, like, just because your kids want to use it doesn't mean they necessarily should use it too. So just because they are using some or wanting to use some technology doesn't mean they necessarily it's going to be the best thing for their age or that. It shouldn't just be a given that because they want to, that's what they get.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of skipped your question there, Berkley, but I'll jump back in here. I've got a few tips. So
Yes.
There's a number of different things I think that can be really helpful for managing device use. So, Eric already mentioned one, but charge the device outside the room.
Yep.
Don't charge it in your bedroom. go get a real alarm clock.
Right.
There's research that shows as well that having your phone as your alarm, it rings, and the first thing that we do then is pick up our phone and reintroduce stress and anxiety into our life from the moment we wake, rather than having our own thoughts for a while. So I'd really encourage, keep the phone out of the room, go get a real alarm clock. They're $4.99 at the dollar store, and have that moment in the day where you're free and your children are free to engage with whatever they want in the morning, and not be drawn right back in. For students and for parents, have some phone-free zones that are in existence, and I would encourage children and our students too to set these on their own as well, and to say, hey, we're going out for dinner with 4 or 5 friends. Let's stack our phones on the table and talk and just be connected with one another for the next hour. And often when they do that, they're quite happy they did by the end. So some phone-free zones. There's some simple ones as far as using your device, like being aware of the blue light settings and making sure you turn that on in the evening so that the phone filters out the blue light and allows you to kind of tone down your evening at the end of the day. For studying, for work, it's, our mind only has so much processing power. So when my phone is on the table beside me while I'm writing up an email that I need to send off, and it buzzes, it's stealing part of my ability to focus on the task at hand. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's a great thing to have a phone sitting right alongside as we go through our day. I've got more. I can go for a while. So
no, that's awesome. No, it's really great. I think a lot of our high school families are probably listening thinking, yeah, how do I reclaim this ground of my child is already on this journey of having their phones in their bedroom, and they are kind of the boss. And so we've been asking each of our guest speakers to speak a little bit to that issue. Any thoughts, insights that come up in terms of that conversation of how do you navigate this with your children, middle school, secondary age? What does that look like?
Well, I think it's probably there's no putting, is the phrase putting Pandora back in the box? I forget. There's no putting things back. But I also wonder if there's not a full truth to some of what a parent might feel, that everyone has a phone when they're 9 or 12 or 15. All the other parents are letting their children take phones to their bedrooms. All of them have LTE data plans. All of them have the newest iPhone that is pocket supercomputer. And I suspect that a lot of that is narratives that people hear and feel, and it's very real feeling to them. I met with someone in the last week or two who said they felt like the meanest parent because they were not allowing their student to have a phone in the bedroom at night. And that was kind of the story. But I suspect that narrative is not fully true, and that there's a lot of parents out there who are also holding those lines and saying, you can communicate with your friends outside of this device. And I would definitely encourage that piece of, I think Eric, you used the word gatekeeping on some of those things, that the parent does gatekeep those.
Well, I think we have to look at the long game here too, right? Like, I mean, if Pandora's been let out of the box, and of course you're going to have a harder job to do to try to manage that. But at the end of the day, maybe some of the short-term pain that's needed to help mitigate some of that is going to have long-term benefit in the future. I don't know what that looks like for each parent in their own individual scenario, but that's hard work if you're trying to put it back. Yeah, I can sympathize with that.
Yeah, the thing that I'm hearing lots of from parents is, and it was mentioned earlier, is that they're just afraid to be that person, and then you can't be as a parent. No. You have to take that stand and go, no, you just can't have it. And, that's where we have big shoulders, so you can even use us as a school just to blame us.
Totally.
And go, no, the school says, we're fine with that.
How great would it be to be known as a community that says we're going to normalize these things, like putting our phones away, not just for our students and children, but for ourselves. Like if we shut down at a certain hour and said, hey, we're going to take a Sabbath rest and we're going to do what God did, even in the presence of lots of work to do, and think about what this could look like for our community. What kind of long-term ramifications could that be? Well, I think you'd have a rested community. I think you'd probably have a community that is more intentional with their connections. They'd be probably more imaginative. Probably a lot of our guiding principles would really come alive as well too. So there's probably lots more that we can talk through. Berkley, any other scenarios or questions that we have for Joel and Eric?
Yeah, definitely. That last comment you made is a good segue, talking about putting phones down. Let's take a look at some of the things we can do educationally, K to 12, at our various campuses. And let's start with secondary.
Sure. I mean, I think educationally, there are some challenges screen-wise just in the way that we educate right now, and that our students are on devices pretty regularly in the majority of their courses. And, being aware, I think, is a big piece for us as teachers and staff and administrators in the school, is having an awareness for the amount of time that we're asking our students to be in front of a screen from 8:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. And making sure that we're creating options that are alternative to that as well. That there are spaces for them to be outdoors in the world, that they're active, that they're moving around, that it's the screen and the laptop is a tool, but not the tool of education. And making, allowing that freedom for our students there.
Yeah, I think I'd echo that too. Like we have gone, the last however long mankind has been in existence, but it's only been the last 20 years that we've become so utterly dependent on a large part of our education being based around the internet and that sort of thing. I think I'd also say from a secondary perspective too, that we often assume that our kids are the experts at technology, but when it comes to a lot of basic skills, they can be rather lacking. So creating a good spreadsheet, having good typing skills, how to form a good email, like those are valuable things that they're going to be using in the workforce. That it's so different from how they naturally pick up and use technology, which maybe can be more destructive than uplifting and creative. And
Yeah. Well, it's a big part of our BC education plan, right? We have a lot of the content and the competencies mapped out of what skills we need to be teaching students and how to create really good digital citizens. Where we're coming from here now is how do we think biblically, and how do we start to think about the kind of perspectives that we're trying to introduce as we teach these skills and as we engage with our families and students to develop the responsibility for how to use technology. So, Berkley, back over to you. You look like you have one more question here.
Well, I just got something to add there. So in terms of going through, what we can do with the kids at various levels, for us in middle school, starting with good digital citizenship and really building it on three pillars, that being respect, to protect them, and to educate them. And then if we look at each of those pillars in terms of respect, we need to create digital etiquette, teach digital access, teach digital law. Under the protection pillar, we are doing things like digital rights and responsibilities, digital safety and security, digital health. And then under the education part, it's all about digital commerce, digital communication, and digital literacy. And for us, it starts really with that digital law. And it's like kids in grade 6 or 11, and digital law says that they have to be 13 to be on social media. So parents, as a school, we say, please don't have your kids 11 and 12 years old on social media. That's the foundation. That's the start. We want to give these kids a good foundation and some skills to navigate that world. And even 13 is too young, but all of our discipline tends to come from inappropriate social media use at an early age. And it's really frustrating when we find out that they're 11 years old and they're on TikTok and they're on this Snapchat and they're on that. And that's just so disheartening for us as a school when our parents aren't helping us. It's all about the school and the home and the church trying to work together with the same mindset to help students have success.
Yeah. And we've been reminded by Dave McVitie a number of times, rules without relationship equals rebellion. And I would echo what Berkley has shared with us here in terms of the respect and the protect and the educate piece as we think about what it means to be a Christian community. But in the presence of these rules, these laws, these important guidelines, we need to be communities that have relationship, that we are open and honest about how our technology is forming us. And Eric and Joel, we really appreciate some of the wisdom and the insights you've left us with. Joel, you probably have more things to share, and you could probably go on with a number of tips. We should get you to develop some sort of tech Mr. Ditson's tech resources or something like that. We'll
Put it on the
publish
webpage.
it, put it on the webpage. But
page.
some final comments to Eric and Joel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it probably comes back, I think, to what we were saying before about age appropriateness and just trying to give our kids an understanding of what the world looks like without the use of technology. I think the biggest thing that we can do from an elementary level is forge imagination through imaginative play, forming relationships in amongst peers that do not involve pieces of technology. I think that's probably the most important thing at a young age that you can foster, so that later on, again, they're equipped with the tools to know how to navigate the world without the use of technology. I think at an elementary school, it is good to start introducing them to the idea of getting online, learning to use computers and technology in creative ways, but not necessarily as a way of communication as of yet. Would be my perspective.
Yeah, that's a great reminder of how important play is in terms of our own development. And when we stifle play by just participating in one sort of activity that forms us, we miss out that we are very holistic beings,
Absolutely.
Shaped socially, shaped emotionally, through interfaces, through real life experiences. And without that, we just let technology do this passive kind of shaping of us too.
So I'm just connecting to something you said, Kevin, around rules and rebellion, and also to the desire that we find in our students for connection with one another. And sometimes it might sound a little bit like I'm villainizing some of the technology. I think there are great elements to it, but there are elements as well that are I kind of mentioned a product earlier. I'm the product of some of these, and I am a user who creates daily user counts, and I'm important for revenues. So wanting to draw me back in, and I think it's important to equip our students with that knowledge as well, to know that there are times when they should say no to that and stay out of it, and not get drawn back into that technology. With that said, I think little things like when we do put our phone down and we do engage with the people across from us, it's rewarding. And the number of times we've had students come back from different events, from a team event where they were asked, to put their phones aside, and or a trip somewhere, and they come back and they actually appreciate it, and they go, you know what, the first hour was tough, and then I kind of forgot about it, and then it was just fun to be around my friends, and to not have something coming through that drew me away from them. So I think it's important too to know, like, sometimes that initial hurdle is challenging, but there's a reward on the other end of it, of connecting with our peers and with our community on a far deeper level. There's a good book that I've read, I believe it's by Shannon Tuckle, it could be Sharon. It's called Alone Together.
Shelley.
There we go. Shelley.
Or no, not Shelley. Cheryl Turkle.
There we go.
Fourth time's
fourth time.
And I would encourage, maybe a parent who's struggling through having a challenging discussion with a student who maybe the box has been opened and you want to talk that through, to have a read through that. And she works through, a lot of the reasons why we would want to put some of those things maybe back in the box, in defense of our relationships and our communities.
Yeah. It's a good reminder that it's really easy to find yourself alone, but yet surrounded by hundreds, thousands of voices out there that are possibly interacting with you, but then to find yourself isolated in your own ecosystem. Eric, over to you for some last thoughts and comments and words of wisdom.
Words of wisdom. Yeah, I think there's this, Kevin, what you were alluding to, the idea of being alone in a crowd full of people. I think it was Martin Luther who said it was homo incurvatus, humanity turned in on itself. And I think that with technology being such a powerful influence in our lives, we need to take a look very carefully at what we're filling our lives with, and how we could be turning into ourselves instead of towards each other. And again, I think primarily what we have to look at is who we are in Christ. What is our identity in Christ? And is this drawing us closer to who Christ wants us to be, or is it pulling us away? And that can really help us, I think, inform ourselves and our children as to what is truly important, what is of internal and of lasting importance, I think. So.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank the panel today for this great discussion. I also want to thank you as listeners for tuning in. And again, just to be interactive, feel free to reach out to us at our email. It's podcast@langleychristian.com. And we will engage in any of your questions or comments or concerns. Again, thanks for listening.